Today on the Leadership to Wealth podcast, we have a TikTok sensation and we get to talk about how to build a TikTok following, as well as social justice issues, being a bouncer, and how to living your best life. Today's show, Namu Williams. All right, guys, welcome to the Leadership to Wealth podcast, and my guest today, Namu Williams. Namu, how you doing? Glad to have you in the house.
Glad to be here, Saucy Neil. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So we came across one another. We ran across one another on TikTok, and I'll tell you, just to kick it off, how I saw your TikTok was you were commenting on bouncers, and you were commenting on fight scenarios, and I started going, oh, this is hilarious. This guy actually knows what he's talking about here. I've done a little bit of bouncing in my life, but give us a little bit of background into why you were commenting on being a bouncer and bouncing.
Well, predominantly because I was a bouncer for such a long time. I was a bouncer in nightclubs for about 13 years. In that transition from basic nightclub security all the way up to head of security, which is just the person who manages the bouncers. It's, it sounds fancy and pretentious, but it's really just a pay grade above. But I have a ton of experience. I've worked in clubs that'll hold 200 people all the way up to, 2,500 people. So I saw quite a few fighting videos on TikTok, as you will see all over the internet. People, for some reason, are, attracted to violence. But I saw a lot of misinformation. I saw a lot of tough guys acting tough, but clearly not knowing what they were talking about. So I just started correcting some things that I saw, or using my own experience to speak to certain questions that people had, and it kind of blew up. I mean, I speak mostly about social justice issues and political things on my TikTok, but surprisingly, the bouncer talk side of things is pretty popular.
Yeah. Well, everyone's got an opinion on it, right? And everyone's been there. And I've seen so many. I was going through some of the comments, and it is hilarious. Some of the things that people will say to you. You don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And so one of the video in particular, guys, if you're checking this out, you want to go check out Namu Williams' page and see this video. He's talking about this bouncer that starts taking off his jacket. And you said two things to take note of. What are those two things that you need to be aware of when you see a guy doing something like that?
One is that he's pretty confident in his ability, and if he's calm like that, then that's when you really have to worry about things. When somebody is clearly assessing the situation and deciding that you're not an immediate threat and they have time to take their jacket off, then that's something to pay attention to. And the other issue is that anybody with experience knows that a loose jacket, something with long sleeves, can be used against you in a fight, so especially people who study jiu-jitsu or, ground grappling, judo, things like that, they understand that the gi is a very useful tool when fighting somebody else, and that translates to regular clothing as well.
Yes, absolutely. I've been fortunate enough to be able to do some Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and you see a jacket, and it's a beautiful thing to see, right?
Yes, you just want to grab.
When a couple of moves and the guy's done. But I do remember, and I'd love to throw this at you. I remember back in the day. And since we're gonna let's just get into a little bit of this fun. Back in the day, I was a punk on the streets and in a gang, and I remember that. I remember taking my jacket off, and this one time I'm getting ready to fight this guy that, if he ever watched this, he'll laugh at it. But this guy should have crushed me because he was towering over me, easily had 100 pounds on me. We got out to the parking lot. We tossed our jackets off and getting ready to go. And I go ahead and put my hands into my jeans, into my pockets. And then I realized, I'm not going to be able to get my hands out of the pocket. So I take them and I put them behind my head. Now, most people are going to think this is the dumbest thing ever. But it was there was, first of all, an air of cockiness. Yeah, I was really cocky, but the other side of it is I was actually getting into a prepared stance. I was bringing my hands up. Now, most people, if your hands come out in front of you, they're ready. I put my hands up here, and this guy was looking at me going, what is this
Perplexed.
guy doing? Are you gonna fight? I'm like, yeah, let's go. And it was the funniest thing ever to see a guy 6'4", 250 pounds. Like I said, at the time, he had a good 100 pounds on me. I was a thin guy back then, and he ended up walking away because it was
Well,
so you could see he was confused. And what I got from that, you tell me, you give me your assessment. What I got from that was he was like, he was not used to anyone ever standing up to him that was that small, that he got confused.
there are three things in that scenario that I would think potentially.
Yeah.
The first being, okay. Well, actually, let me take it a step back. Anytime you're in a fight, fights happen generally the same way almost every time. There's aggression on both sides. Generally, they bark a little bit. The general poses come up, and then some fight happens. So if there's any deviation from that, then that gives people pause. They're like, what's happening here? So anything out of the normal, anything out of the ordinary is going to give somebody pause most of the time. So you putting your hands up like this probably was enough for him to be like, huh. Now, two responses to that. The first response could be like, this guy knows something that I don't know. Maybe he's a martial artist. He's got a lot of experience, so I'm going to back off. But the second could also be, this guy doesn't know anything about fighting, so I don't want to beat his ass. I'm much bigger than him. He's clearly not a fighter, so I'm going to walk away. Not to say that that's what happened. I don't want to take away from, your intimidation factor, but, it could happen more than one way in those scenarios. And the third thing is, there's a lot of posturing, obviously, in fights, and size differences sometimes come into play. And I've been in plenty of situations, as you may have seen in some other videos, where I've been beaten up by guys smaller than me, whether it's in practice or in an actual fight, and vice versa. I've had good success against guys larger than me. But the reality is that every fight environment, though similar in some circumstances, is wildly different, because neither of you generally know the other person's skill set or experience. And that's why I almost always recommend to not fight. Realistically, the bottom line is, because of all those unknowns, you're taking such a big risk when you get into even somebody who's way smaller than you could have a knife or a gun. So, my bottom line is, the advice is to never fight.
Yeah. That's a great point. And it's interesting because back then, and it's still pretty much true today, is I knew that most guys, especially the big guys, they always did one thing. They did the big
haymaker,
right?
Right.
So it's like, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. I can't.
Well, a big advantage of you actually having your hands up here already is that you're already got a little bit of protection here for anything that comes in. Although, you're limiting yourself in terms of mobility. But the other thing about the haymaker is, with big guys, is that, and a lot of people don't get this, but if you're a really big guy, if you're larger than average, you probably didn't fight much growing up. Unless you were the fighting type and you really enjoyed fighting, you avoided fights because everybody was intimidated. A lot of times they're very inexperienced. And when you see those big haymakers, that's pretty much the only thing they've got. It's the one weapon in their arsenal.
Yeah, absolutely. I happen to know that he was intimidated only because I ended up running into him another time, and he was, oh gosh, good 50 feet away. He looked up, saw me, and walked the other direction. It was the funniest thing. But anyways, if you're watching this, you know who you are. Sorry, man. It's been a lot of years. Didn't mean
he was young.
Yeah, pretty young. But one thing, and I'd like to say that I'm a bit of a student of fighting, and one of the things I did know back then and continue to know now is that 9 times out of 10, if I saw a guy that had a weapon, I knew I was going to win the fight. That's the
interesting
thing. I knew I was going to win the fight because his 9 times out of 10, his security was now going to be in the weapon.
Right.
I loved seeing baseball bats. I loved seeing baseball bats because guys now think they're superhuman, and you just have to know a little bit. Now, interestingly, and I think this is exactly what you're just saying, is that anyone that actually knows how to fight doesn't want to.
Right.
Because that in a fight, anything can happen, and it's usually going to be catastrophic. So,
with some exceptions, of course.
Never happen. Yeah.
I mean, there's always the kind of person who's just a scrapper. They're just, or maybe they grew up fighting and it's just in their nature. And so it's, personality, or they've got a terrible home life and they get beat on at home. And I hate to say that, but that is a precursor to a lot of those kind of personality changes as well. You have a tough home life where you grow up poor and you're constantly scrapping to survive. Yeah. It makes it a lot easier for you to get into that mode.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is kind of curious. I've always found this interesting. I'm going to say back then, I got the gray hairs. So you got some gray hairs to be able to say it. So back then, though, when you got into one of those kind of scraps, even if the guy beat you, you actually became somewhat of friends, or there was now respect.
A lot of the time, right?
It was the weirdest thing. Like some of the guys that I ended up fighting, we ended up becoming friends. Now, not when I was in the street gang, but
sure.
Otherwise, you got into a fight. That guy ended up becoming your friend. I don't think that is the case anymore.
It's hard for me to speak to that because, I'm teaching my son two major rules when it comes to fighting. Don't do anything and everything you can to walk away, but the minute they touch you, hurt them badly. Put them on the ground and end the fight immediately. And damn the consequences. A lot of schools these days, it's interesting that you bring this up because it's very pertinent to school age children. A lot of schools are zero tolerance policies, which is where regardless of who was at fault, who instigated or who was the aggressor, both children get in trouble. And I fully disagree with this. I think it takes the responsibility away from the grownups to determine fault and responsibility. And I think it also teaches children that draconian response is the best way to deal with these things. But at the same time, I told my son, he's 11 right now, so he's not really in the fighting age yet, but he's coming into junior high, so he might have to deal with it. But I told him, I said, I'll never judge you. You'll never get in trouble for defending yourself, but you will get in huge trouble for being the aggressor, Yeah. So I think we're in a society now, to answer your question, where, and this ties in with neighborliness in general. We used to be at a point 30, 40, 50 years ago where we knew most of the neighbors close to us, around our block generally, sometimes a little further away. These days, for example, I live in a condo complex with 30 homes, and I know maybe 2 or 3 people, and I'm an outgoing, gregarious person. I make it a point of going out and meeting people and introducing myself. And I still, it's a very small number of people. And related to that, I think you're right that children and young adults, both, I don't think they have the connection community-wise to foster that post-fight friendship. Before, we all lived close enough and we knew enough mutual people, and now that doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Because 9 times out of 10, you're going to see that person who knows how many times over again.
Yeah, over and over again.
Area,
right.
They went to the school you went to, whatever, right? You're going to run into them over again. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And that's interesting because I very much taught my kids the same thing. And I remember my wife going, "What are you teaching them?" I said, "They are, if it comes to it, I want them to protect themselves, and we'll deal with the consequences."
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I've tried to teach them and put them into it enough times so that they're comfortable with being able to use less force, i.e. a little bit of cut off the oxygen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an interesting point too, because there are a lot of parents out there who encourage their children to be definitive in their defense the same way that I do. But at the same time, they don't teach their children restraint. They don't teach their children limits. And so a lot of these kids, I worry, the 13 to 14-year-old kids who just don't have the life experience. I see a lot of videos of parents letting their kids fight, and those children could seriously hurt somebody just because they don't understand where to stop,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is going to sound crazy. When my kids were, especially my boys when they were young, but even I've got 4 kids. My girls, I taught them basics, how to fight off of their back. If you've got an assailant on top of you, someone's trying to rape you, that kind of stuff, you want to be able to fight off your back. I taught the boys, and when I wanted them to fight when they were young. Like I would, my wife's like, they're fighting. I'm like, let them fight.
Let them get it out.
Let them do it so that it's not the first time that they have to deal with it out on the street.
What is the Mike Tyson quote? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's the problem, because you if you don't have the experience, like harken back to the big guy thing. If you're not used to being hit or tackled or leg swept or any of that stuff, then you don't know how to react to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And now my boys are both teenagers, so I've now got a little bit of a different deal because the testosterone is kicked in, and now they've got some skills on top of that. So it's like, hey, stop it. And you can see when the when the light bulb is not on, but the testosterone bulb is going
full steam. Yeah.
So that's hilarious. But so this is interesting, and because when we get into talking about being a bouncer and stuff like that, you would think that the bouncers always have to be the big guys. But if you're not I saw this one TikTok you've got there where you go stand in a doorway and you're showing your height versus your size.
Right.
And but the reality is that you were able to still be a bouncer. How is it that you could manage those situations while probably oftentimes being the smaller guy?
In general, the smallest guy on my squad almost all the time. And, let's clarify. Small is subjective. Size is subjective, depending on what you're talking about. And, at 6 feet tall and 250 pounds, I'm not small, but I'm not bouncer big, right? And the reality is that I went into bouncing at 18 years old from a bar back position. So, I got hired to be a bar back. And I kept jumping in to help at the fights whenever something would happen. And the owner was like, hey, do you want to do security one of these nights on our slow nights? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Paid, I think, $10 a night more than bar backing, but way better because I don't have to constantly pick up glasses. But the reality is so much more goes into being a great bouncer than just size and even just fighting ability, perception, being observant, being good at spotting trouble spots, becoming a student of personality and communication more than just a big intimidating presence. If you're standing in a dark room with flashing lights and there are 200-300 people dancing and drinking and interacting, you've got to be very good at scanning quickly and repeatedly and recognizing instantly potential trouble. And I was very good at that, way better than the average bouncer, I would say. And most importantly, in the growth of my career as a bouncer, I never tried to be a fighter. I wasn't there to beat people's asses like a lot of bouncers are. I hate to say this, a lot of bouncers who just like to be in the fights. And related, we can talk about this more later, but there are quite a few bouncers who become bouncers because they're too chicken shit to fight by themselves, right? Like out in the street, they won't get into fights. But in a bouncing scenario where they have other guys to back them up, it's a much safer environment. So they feel comfortable being the tough guy, being the aggressor, right? Yeah. So, but that's not something I wanted to do. But when you're in that environment, you have to be fast to respond. You have to be friendly. You have to be polite, but you also have to know when to flip the switch. And there are definite lines in the sand when somebody is mouthing off. I'm trying not to curse. I'm such a bad cursor, but when somebody's mouthing off to you and it's clear they're the aggressor and you've given them plenty of chances, then there comes a time when you just have to put hands on. You pick them up, you carry them outside, and if they swing, they swing. It's just the way it is, right? Yeah. But so there's my goal as a bouncer was just to be the guy who was the cohesion in the unit, making sure everybody had what they needed. That's how I grew into being a head of security too, because I just became very adept at, helping the other bouncers have a good experience. Because quite a few people follow me who want to learn about becoming a bouncer, who want to get into bouncing. So here is an important tip. Your size does have an effect on your ability. But there can be smaller bouncers, there can be larger bouncers. But if you really want to be great as a bouncer, you want to be good at your job, and you want to command the highest amount of money doing what you do, then become a people person. Learn how to read people, learn how to engage with people in a friendly, professional way up until you have to be,
not
any
friendly.
number of aggressors. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll tell you something funny along those lines is that I've always been the smaller guy. And one of the advantages of being a late bloomer and being a small guy was I had to learn how to see trouble before it got to me.
Right.
Like I remember in grade 9 when they used to do what do you call it? Like Frosh Week, and they would,
hazing week.
Hazing, yeah, right. Mm-hmm. And they were doing hazing, and I would be looking. I was like, okay, this is where all the minor niners are walking. We're all going down this hallway,
right?
And the football guys, they'd go into their stance, and and then soon as a part, and boom, they'd come and they'd do stuff like that. Well, that was stuff that happened back in those days, right?
Yeah, I actually avoided being hazed sophomore and junior year, and it wasn't until my late junior year that they finally caught up with me. Like I avoided all the jocks, who were bad about that. I would go to band practice because I was a band nerd, and I would walk.
You went to band camp?
Oh, heck yeah. No food's involved, though.
Yeah, okay.
But unfortunately, maybe. But, I would walk 1.5 miles out of my way through a small forest to get to the stadium for practice because our stadium was off campus. And they still found me. Like these guys did research and talked to friends. Hey, where does he hang out? Where does he go? And then they caught me in the middle of the forest. But, presence of mind, being able to recognize trouble. The minute I saw somebody on the pathway ahead of me in a place where nobody ever walks, even at 17, I understood that something was going to happen. And I carried a can of hairspray with a lighter, and I would just light it on fire and try to burn, and they'd run back. Oh, yeah. They didn't even understand that, like, it wouldn't do anything but singe their hair. But, they don't know better. They're teenagers.
You are watching the Leadership to Wealth podcast with Namu Williams, and we're talking about how to defend yourself with a can of hairspray and a lighter from bigger assailants.
But only in high school. I don't know that would work as an adult.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm willing to bet it would still work, but it's but it is funny and interesting that when you come up that way, you do tend to have a third eye. You start to be able to sense those things. And one of the things I found that when I did I was only a bouncer for 3-4 years, and for those 3-4 years that I was doing it, and I only got called in at certain times for the ethnic parties. So when I got, yeah, that's right. Actually, I didn't want to do the bouncing normally because you actually made more money
on the special events
or tips. Tips, I was like, forget the bouncing. I wanted the money.
So, bartenders made way better money than bouncers.
Absolutely, right. And you got to pick up the girls. But anyways,
I got to pick up the girls, but
yes, you were a special bouncer. But one of the things that I found was that you could actually see something occurring before it occurred, right? If you get that sense. And so one of the things that I found that I was able to do, and you could speak to this, was you got the lights going off and everything, but you can go, something's going on over there, and you can just say, hey, can you go check on those guys, make sure that everything's okay over there? And sometimes
Yeah.
it's as simple as just walking by, how's everybody doing? Oh yeah, okay, great. And everything calms down and it never turns into anything.
Right.
I actually looked at that as being the win rather than, the win being tossing the guy out the door.
Convince yourself as a bouncer to be the guy who prevents the fight rather than the guy who ends the fight. Yeah. For so long, that's why so many bouncers have such a bad reputation, because they want to wade in and swing. They want to throw blows. They want elbows to the face. But, and there's a place for that in certain bars where they don't care about, professionalism, where they don't, laws don't really matter to them. You're going to have to be that kind of bouncer. But in general, in most establishments, especially upscale establishments, your best skill set inside the bar is observation, right? And just like you were talking about, like you can sense a change if you've done it long enough, you have the right skill sets, you can sense a change in the atmosphere as a whole. A lot of times talking levels will change, volume levels will change. Sometimes you'll just hear, it could be as obvious as a louder voice, right? But it can also be a hushed tone, right? Sometimes the air goes out of the room right before a fight happens. Sometimes you get indicators throughout the night of certain people that you need to pay more attention to. I hate to say this is one of the worst things about nightclubs for women. Women have it so bad in the nightclub environment because guys will grab asses, they will touch inappropriately, they'll just harass, hey baby, come talk to me, grab their arms, but if you have a woman who comes up to you more than once to tell you about somebody, first of all, my suggestion as a professional is the first time a woman comes up to you and says somebody's bothering me, you go up to that person and you say, hey, we had a complaint about you. I'm not going to tell you who it was, but I'm happy to have you here. All you have to do is keep your hands to yourself or whatever it is related to it. Now, if you witness it happen yourself, especially depending on the variation of the egregiousness of what the person did was, you should eject that person. But a lot of times bouncers are told by owners, and this is a whole separate story, keep them in. They don't want a reputation of kicking too many people out because you can't sell them alcohol, right? Yeah. So when you're listening for those cues, you're looking at body language, you're paying attention to how many people are talking about which people. You just become adept at recognizing those things on a subconscious level, and you don't even have to physically apply those skills. They just happen.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, because a lot of people don't like talking about this, but I'm sure you're willing to put weigh in on this. Did you guys have the back door?
Oh yeah, but So for those who aren't aware, the back door is generally a place where where bouncers will drag people out and beat the shit out of them. Whether you irritated the bouncer or you caused a lot of trouble in the bar or you broke something, a lot of bouncers, especially back in the day, not quite so much anymore, but back in the day, and in dive bars, especially biker bars, for example, you'll get pulled out in the back and there are no cameras in the back and there are very low lights in the back and they just beat the crap out of you and then leave you on the ground. So no, in my bars, in my nightclubs, never. 100% never. I'm concerned with law and legality. I'm concerned with people's rights. I'm concerned with, appropriate response levels. And so if somebody, I don't care at all what you do in the club, even up to and including harassing somebody sexually. I'm still going to treat you within the letter of the law, right? I may want to beat your ass. I may want to hurt you badly because of how badly, what you've done to this woman, because it's completely inappropriate. Right. But, I'm the boss. Or even as a bouncer, and this is an important distinction to make too. As a bouncer, you are the boss of yourself. You have to treat yourself like a leader. You have to, a lot of guys they need to be led. They need to have a hierarchy. They need to have leadership above them. But a great bouncer is his own leader in addition to that. taking responsibility for his own actions. So yeah, we would never do that. And in fact, early on in my days as a head of security, when I was training up new people and trying to get a good team, a good squad built, that was an issue because a lot of guys just wanted to immediately throw blows. They wanted to swing regardless of the level of infraction. You know, the minute somebody acted up, these bouncers and their testosterone would just get the better of them, and they just want to wade in. So no, yes, happens, not with me though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll leave that one. The back door is the back door, and nothing good happens out there. So, so I'm really interested about what you talked about there with regards to leading oneself, even as a bouncer. Can you say a little bit more about what that? Because I don't think that people understand that you need that leadership of self, even in that environment.
Yeah, well, I go so far as to say that you need that leadership regardless of what job you're in. If you want to excel, if you want to progress, and you want to be the best of the best, you need to be a leader first and self-manage. You need to be your own manager, and you need to take accountability for your own actions. But in the security world, let's keep it real. You don't really go into security. You don't go into bouncing to earn money. You know, the ceiling on that industry as a career is really low. Yeah. And I would love to say, so, you know, I did a little bit of one-off security in a couple of clubs in LA. And I was hoping that, you know, with my experience, that of course that they'd be much more open to paying a higher level of money. The problem is that bar owners and nightclub owners in general are miserly. They are very money stingy, and they are concerned with the bottom line more than they are with creating the right environment and hiring the best staff. So, and you have a huge turnover too a lot of times. So you'll have a lot of people who are low income, willing to take whatever money they can get. So they don't do that well. But the more managerial in your mindset, the more leadership you assign to yourself, the better you will handle yourself, the better you'll look to the owners of the establishment, the more likely you are to grow out of that position of just bouncer, if that's something you're looking to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna switch gears. Obviously, there's a ton of information there when it comes to bouncing. You know, you guys watching this and you're interested in being a bouncer, obviously reach out to Namu here. But let me ask this question, because people are, you've really become quite the sensation on TikTok.
Surprisingly.
Tell me about that. How did that kind of happen? How did you get onto TikTok? And then what was it that enabled you to kind of blow up, shall we say?
Hey, I'm going to say it was 100% luck and the TikTok algorithm. First of all, shout out to TikTok for developing one of the best algorithms on the planet for getting people to see the things they want to see, right? Yeah. TikTok does a fantastic job. I have a lot of complaints about TikTok, but overall, I'm happy with it as a platform, specifically because they do such a fantastic job of putting videos in front of me that I want to see. I will admit here, just as an aside, that the vast majority of what I watch on TikTok is not my own type of content. I look at attractive women shaking their booty most of the time, and TikTok knows that's what I like, so it fills my feed with that.
TikTok, keep filling his feed with booty shaking.
Keep it up. But that was a big part of the reason why I think that I blew up. I started my TikTok account a couple years ago, and I had a handful of friends who followed me. And then I made, I had a little bit of growth over a few months, got up to like 200 or 300 followers. And then I made a TikTok video about a young Latino gentleman who was being detained, what most of us feel like illegally by ICE, by immigration in America. And his backstory was ridiculous. The fact that he even got picked up in the first place. He was a DACA recipient. He had broken no laws prior to this point. He was a college graduate. He had no criminal history, and he was picked up on a jaywalking charge. Right? He was just walking across the street. Police picked him up, and they dropped the charge and then handed him over to immigration because he didn't have a current green card. Now his card had, in my experience, in my understanding, his card had expired. He just hadn't renewed it because Trump was in office and he was worried that he'd be deported. And then he got into the system and he was there for like 2 years, shoving him left and right, putting him here and there. Family barely had any contact about it. And I just was furious when I heard this story. And so I made this impassioned TikTok ranting about the system. And basically, I had my California ball cap on, and at the end of the video, I took my California ball cap on and I put this Mexico cap on, and it resonated really well with Latino TikTok. And I got maybe 20,000 followers off that video alone.
Wow. And
that was kind of the spike that initiated the growth. And then over the next year, I'm up to about 105,000 followers, I think, which to me is massive and huge. But, some of the people that I follow have 1 million, 1.5 million. So, the growth it's relative as well.
Yeah. No, listen, that's amazing. I think what people are probably TikTok, I'm sure what you guys are resonating with is that you spoke up about something. You spoke up. I think it was something that touched people.
But I think it was more that I spoke up about something that touched people that they don't think white guys would normally care about, right? So, here's this white dude acting like he really cares, and we're not used to seeing this. This is crazy. Let me share it to my friends. Yeah. And for those of you watching on TikTok, if you want a tip about growing your algorithm, you really need to engage conversation. You have to have communication, even if it's negative. I hate to say this, negative conversation drives growth almost more, I would think, than positive conversation. The two things that I've noticed the most, about my growth are when I see shares and comments. Those are the two strongest indicators that your video will do well. So the faster you get people talking and the more you get them sharing. But back to the original point, I speak to issues that matter to me, and I consider myself a global human. I care about the world. I don't just care about America. I don't just care about my family. I do care about both of those deeply, but I'm a citizen of the world, and I can't wait until we have a world government instead of just all these local warring factions, which is all we are right now, Right. So when I say these things, and I rant, I think it resonates with the fact that I say what I feel, and I don't try to temper it and make it, polished. I just say how I feel, and that really resonates with people.
Yeah, well, I think one of the important parts about that is that you give words to how people are feeling, right? They're not able to express those same things. That there is that pent up anger, energy, whatever, and being able to put it into words is such a powerful piece. And the reason I'm part of me is thinking that is because your content wouldn't normally come onto my feed,
your page,
right? And and so it was interesting when yours came on because it was completely out of the norm. And but I think the piece is that you were putting to words, a tense situation, but you were giving it power, right? Like you were putting it into those terms. And so it resonated with me. I started following it. I was like, yep, this guy knows what he's talking about.
I appreciate that.
Been there.
And
he's taking out the jacket, taking out, he's
doing the stretching. Yeah. It's funny too, because it's actually good that I have a lot of people who disagree with me. It's actually very good for the algorithm, for my algorithm, that there are a lot of people who say, you're full of shit. You don't know what you're talking about. I welcome them, but, not in a friendly way. Like there are a lot of creators who are very good at dealing with the negative people in their comment threads in a professional, even friendly sometimes way. They're very mellow. They can handle themselves in a way that doesn't push people off too much. But I'm not like that. I grew up poor, I grew up hard, and I grew up in predominantly Black community. I learned the early on, mama jokes were my thing. So my natural response is to make fun of somebody when they disagree with me. Not the best way to handle it, but to me, I feel like if you come into my comment section and you're reasonable and respectful and you have a disagreement, hey, bring it on, right? But if you come in, talk, yeah, exactly. We'll have a real discussion. But if you come in my comments section mouthing off, what's clearly or demonstrably false or easily disprovable, if all you're doing is spouting talking points that you heard somebody else say, if you're just sheep, clown, this, that, then I'm going to make fun of you and I'm going to have a good time doing it.
Yeah. Well, let me ask this: why TikTok? Why build this following? Why keep talking into the space?
Oh, I'm super vain. I'm super into hearing my own voice. I love to see my pretty face on the and I'm not kidding. You think I'm joking and being facetious. I really, I've enjoyed listening to myself talk most of my life, and I know that I'm not particularly smart in the sense that a lot of people assign the word smart to. I'm smart enough, and this is the catchphrase on my own podcast, which I never record anymore, but I'm smart enough to know that I'm not smart enough. But it doesn't change the fact that I'm enamored with my own opinion. If I feel strongly about something, I'm going to put it out there for the world to hear. And this is interesting and related. I've had Facebook since 2007, right? Yeah. And I have not ever grown my Facebook followers or my friends list larger than 500 or 600 people. TikTok was my audience. TikTok was people who wanted to hear me say the things that I say. Facebook, not the right platform. So to you out there who, you have something to say, you want to create things, you want to get your art out in the world, even if one particular platform doesn't work, there are millions of opportunities out there, and you just got to have patience, keep trying, keep putting that effort out there, and you'll find the platform that works for you. TikTok's mine.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that one in terms of you found a platform, you get to speak, your voice is out there. What about monetizing? Do you monetize it?
I am monetized. Yeah. So.
Yeah. How does that happen?
Well, originally, I don't know what the requirements are now, but back when I became a creator in the Creator Fund, you had to have 10,000 followers. You had to have a certain level of engagement consistently over time. Yeah. And I met all the metrics eventually. It took a while, but I hit them. And then I got $0 from them for like a year, right? Yeah. So I don't know what the actual math is, but from my reading, it's something like 1 million views will give you 20 cents, some ridiculously tiny amount of money. So in order to make real money at TikTok, you have to consistently have multiple million view videos daily, right? And there are creators who are doing that. There are huge creators making good money. But I'll be transparent. To date, I've earned $22 from TikTok that I've received. I now have about $300 in my TikTok account, but you can't release it till 30 days after that pay period. So I haven't actually received that yet. So it is there. It's just realistically at my level with about 100,000 followers, making the number of videos I make as often as I make them, you could probably make $20 or $30 a month in income. It's definitely not a work. It's not something, unless you're going to commit to it and make it your whole job, your entire career, and you're going to invest money and buy the right equipment and do lighting and take time to write out things and learn scripts and find your niche, most importantly, niche for those of us who don't know how to pronounce it correctly. Unless you do all of those things, then it's definitely not worthwhile to be a TikTok creator in the Creator Fund. YouTube pays way better. They have a much better system. Now, if TikTok ever figures out a way to put ads in front of my content where the ad purchasers can pay me, it'll probably significantly improve, but I doubt that they'll ever do that.
Interesting. Okay, so that's so it's interesting. I actually I talk to a lot of people about the benefits of social media, TikTok, this kind of stuff. And one of the things now for me being in my industry, I'm in real estate. I'm a real estate investor, lending, stuff like that. You guys call it hard money lending. So I do stuff like that. And one of the things that I've found, because I'm not even at 10,000 followers on TikTok, but what I've found is that I can actually monetize in a completely different way. I don't actually have to charge or make money from that, but by putting information out there, by putting knowledge and experience out there, then people are able to engage. They're able to give me a call, say, hey, I want to learn more about this. I want to invest. I want to, I'm looking to borrow money, all of these kind of things. And I'm able to kind of monetize it in completely different.
Let's speak to that, because those are two different types of creators. You have the creator who, you're a perfect example of how I try to encourage a lot of my small business friends. I encourage them to get on TikTok. I find your niche in your industry and then drill down into that sub-market, because exactly like you were saying, what you're not trying to earn money from TikTok, you're trying to earn, subsequent revenue from people who find you through TikTok. And real estate seems to be a very effective path for a lot of people.
I'll tell you, it was actually completely by accident. I didn't have much of a social media presence a couple of years ago, and then I started really moving forward in 2020,
right?
And just before the pandemic, right? And one of the things that came out of the pandemic was people didn't know what to do, so they were asking some questions on social media. So I started answering questions
on social media,
right? On TikTok, and boom, it started blowing up. And I was like, oh, people have a whole lot of questions. Let me just answer these questions here, and people can get the information, get to know a little bit about the stimulus and the how to get your check, and just simple stuff, right? Start putting it out there. And lo and behold, people really appreciated that information, that knowledge. I didn't know at that time that what it would turn into. I didn't realize. And listen, if you've got small business owners, stuff like that are interested in that, listen, we'll do a webinar. I can talk to them about how they can actually monetize through that, because
absolutely,
quite honestly, and we don't need to charge anything. We'll do it for those guys for free. And I can share how, with just a small group of people and just doing a little bit, there's nothing special. Look at me. There's nothing special. I don't got any powder on my face.
Wait, you're beautiful. What are you talking about, Neil?
Beautiful how you are, right? That's right. All my curves and all my imperfections, right? Thank you, John Legend. So it's but being able to be out there, give quality information, and being able to provide that stuff, you're able to really use it in another way. But I saw your page and I thought, this is really, man, look at this guy. He's getting to talk and he's blowing up. I wonder what he's doing with it.
And it's interesting.
Your story is interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, thank you. But it's basically, that's the second type of creator, is a creator who doesn't have a product to market, right? I'm the product. What my opinion is the product. And in that sense, it's difficult to monetize me without creating a podcast, without, turning it into an actual, endeavor. But, what we do, and something I haven't done yet, but I plan on doing eventually, is creators like me will partner with outside businesses who will pay you to place, a mention, for example. It's difficult for me specifically, though, because I am incendiary. I am, unvarnished and truthful in a way that makes it difficult for advertisers to want to spend that money, Yeah. So I don't see that being a large monetized option for me, but it still exists, So ultimately, if you're a small business or you're a niche creator and you can drive traffic from TikTok to your actual business, that's one way. Another way is to get the advertisements, the advertisers to pay you to mention them, and then to do sponsored posts, sponsored by. And then the third way is just to have TikTok pay you, which I'm fine with for now,
Yeah.
I earn my money through photography, so I'm not too worried about TikTok.
Oh, tell us a little bit about that, man. We didn't even hear about that. Tell us a little bit
Oh,
about your photography.
well, I'm a nude photographer, and no, I'm just kidding. I do some nude photography, but that's not my business. We'll sign you up. I'm actually starting to do what they call doudoir, male boudoir sessions. So that's apparently a popular thing these days. No, I predominantly shoot. Oh, you're getting in your fighting. You want to fight me? Is that what it is?
I already got the pose.
You've got some experience doing it. So basically, I shoot people, I shoot events, I shoot family portraits, and I do a handful of weddings every year. But that was actually post bouncer. It wasn't too much of a transition from there to photographer, and I started becoming a photographer during my bouncing years. So,
wow. Okay, so you're out there shooting weddings and
well, originally I was, funnily enough, are you familiar with the import car show scene? I don't know if you guys have that out in Canada. How about the movie Fast and the Furious?
Yeah.
Fast and Furious. Yeah. So when that industry first jumped off in the 90s, I had a website that was for car show models. Most of my friends took pictures of the cars at car shows, and I took pictures of the pretty girls, right?
Yes. Okay.
And eventually,
where this is going.
Right. Yeah. But eventually the models were like, hey, can you take pictures of my family? And I'm like, sure. And then somebody offered to pay me to take pictures of their family. And then it just spiraled from there, snowballed rather. So it just developed from a hobby, taking pictures of pretty girls, into a career.
Right. Wow. And that's I think that's a great point that you bring up, because you didn't go down that path. It wasn't like you were intentionally.
I wasn't intentionally going that way, right?
But you started, and the path kind of made itself known, and
it opened up.
I think for people that are watching, that's an important part about leadership. This is Leadership to Wealth podcast. One of the things is that sometimes you just go in a direction, and another door will open up in that as you're moving. And
right.
It's so much easier when you're moving in a direction than trying to, everyone's trying to plan everything and get everything just perfect. And then, and things never happen and they can't figure it out. Move in that direction and you'll be surprised right? Like,
better done than perfect. 100%.
Oh my goodness. That's the name of this episode. Better done than perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Same with TikTok. I mean, when I first started TikTok, I obsessed about wanting to make the right TikTok, to make it the correct way. And I actually refused to make a lot of videos, thinking, oh, I shouldn't make this video. I don't have nice lights. It's not, this background's ugly. I actually lived in a travel trailer when I first started making TikToks in 2020. And so basically, I finally kicked myself in the butt and said, better done than perfect. And I just started. It doesn't matter if I'd shaved or not, if my hair was in terrible shape, if I just woken up, I made those videos. And then that's another important key: consistency. You have to make them on a regular basis. You have to be consistent in your message and your tone, and you'll grow from that alone eventually. It's a much smaller growth, and it takes a much longer time, but there are a lot of things you can do to improve your growth, even if you're not getting that viral exponentiality that you do with that one video,
Yeah.
And now I've got like 7 or 8 videos that are 1 million plus. And first of all, it boggles my mind to think that there are 105,000 people out there that want to hear what I have to say enough to follow me and listen on a regular basis. For a kid who didn't graduate high school, who grew up with nothing, that's serious validation, But then to think that there are millions of views, that some of my videos have been seen by people in Russia, people in Saudi Arabia, people in Brazil, in India, that's mind-boggling to me. And that's why I love platforms like this, because it can get your message in front of the right people, no matter where they are in the world. I love that about TikTok.
Yeah. Wow. Man, there's so many other roads that we could go down, and I realize that we've hit the time. But I got to ask, okay, so what's next, and how can people get a hold of you? What's next for you?
Million followers is next. That's the next obvious step,
followers,
right?
Guys, get on with it. Start following my man Namu Williams.
I'm just, to be perfectly honest, I'd be happy with, just even at 105,000, I'd stay happy at that. But realistically, I'd like to parlay some kind of aspect of my TikTok success into an outside organization. Maybe partner with, a nonprofit who's not afraid of my language, who's not afraid of the tough talk, where I can help them in some way, whether it's to, give half of my TikTok earnings to them or not. Or to create some kind of an external organization that I can either helm or be part of, just to raise awareness for some. And also, by the way, part of the reason why it's so difficult for me to get even more growth is because I talk about so many various topics. I don't talk about just social justice. I don't talk about just politics. I don't talk about just women's rights or children's rights. Any of those things, anything that I think apply to being a good person, if it needs more light, if it needs to be amplified, that's what I do. That's my goal. Yeah. So it's just growth, reach more people.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got an idea. We'll talk about it off air, but okay. So that's great. And so if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
You can follow me and make interesting comments, and then if you do, I'll follow you back, and then we can talk through messages. Or you can just comment and say, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you," much like you did, Neil. You can just say, "Hey, can you message me?" And you can also email me, N as in Namu at namu.love, which is my website. I was going to give my phone number out, but I don't think I'm ready for all the hater phone calls that I'd be getting. But you can find my phone number on the internet. I'm not hard to find. I'm not the hiding type. Yeah. So that's why I don't get a lot of death threats. A lot of people who speak the content that I speak, they get a ton of threats. I don't. I've gotten maybe 2 out of, the last 2 years. Yeah. And I think it's because they understand that I don't care. Come on, come see me. We'll have a chat. Yeah. Authenticity comes across, I feel like, Yeah. Yeah. So, hey, Neil, I just wanted to tell you, man, I appreciate this. Guess what? This is my first ever podcast guest spot.
Hey!
Right here with Neil D'Souza. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a great conversation. The time has just flown by.
I agree.
I can't say that. I think there was maybe one question I actually had to think of. Other than that, it was very engaging, and I really appreciate it. And I think that there's, for people, if you're watching, there are a lot of different pieces there. Everything from relationships to, your own. We talked financial, we talked social media, we talked
absolutely,
and we talked about fighting, and
it's kind of like my TikTok content.
Yeah, that's right. And we even talked a little bit about booty shaking. So we got it all in there. So thank you very much, Namu. Really appreciate it. I really appreciate having you on. And guys, make sure that you go over and check him out. If you don't have TikTok, go download it and go join on and follow Namu. And if you want him back, let us know, because we want to have him back again and get to talk more life, love, and liberty with Namu Williams. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Namu, thanks for being on. We'll see you guys next time on the Leadership to Wealth podcast. Take care.